John, do you, in your bank of knowledge, I'm not sure if you were there, but do you remember when the first ever atomic cup was
1966.
How do you know this stuff?
I was 3 years old, but I started going in 72.
Dang, okay, guys, I have notes, but you actually know this stuff.
I remember when, before they put the park in, on the Pasco side, you could back right up to the water and park along the edge.
Oh.
We used to get in free in middle school for helping to park cars, and 6:30 in the morning, 7 a.m., some drunk guy tries to back up too close to the shoreline. And the sheriff told us, wave your flag if you need. And the shoreline caved in and the guy's car went into the water.
No, seriously.
Yes.
Now that is okay. This is the type of Water Follies gold that I was looking for.
Well,
That's a great story.
Or the guy that was washed up on the beach, he'd passed out.
Okay.
And the races were over, and this guy was just lying on. He was just sleeping with his legs in the water, and people were looking at him like, "Should we haul him out of here? What should anybody
Yes.
got a wagon?"
That's amazing, man. That is a good one. Well, you do, and do you happen to know who won that first race, kicking off Tri-Cities history?
I do not.
It was Miss Budweiser.
I'm not surprised.
And team founder Bernie Little back in the day. So,
Bernie's tree in the pits.
Absolutely. Well, and
I'm a big fan. I grew up with the piston boats.
Yeah, and those were originally the piston-powered boats.
That's why I go, because of the vintage hydros.
Now in modern day, they're using the turbine engines originally that they were taking out of Chinook helicopters. Yeah. So.
And the aircraft engines were either Allisons from World War II fighter planes or Rolls-Royce Griffin engines from British fighter planes. World War II.
I love this. And speaking of planes, later today, 11 to 1 is, I believe, sponsored by STCU. So thank you to them for helping keep things. So you've got the air show going on 11 to 1. And then also just a huge shout out to Tri-Cities local to Apollo.
Yes.
I mean, without those type of sponsorships, this iconic event would be very, very difficult to hold and host.
Kudos to them.
And so it really is billed as the biggest Tri-Cities weekend. And I do think it really showcases our community. There's a lot of people that have come in from out of town to be here. I know a lot of people who originally started getting exposed to the Tri-Cities through the Water Follies and coming to parties and coming to friends that then eventually end up moving here.
Yep.
Not to mention the dollars and tourism money that comes into our community for hotel rooms, shops, everything going on. It really is just one of those quintessential Tri-Cities weekends.
The Tri-Cities is the only course that has had continuous hydro racing since day one.
That is, yes.
And then a close second is Seafair in Seattle. But we are the two big daddies of the hydroplane circuit.
I absolutely love it. And then when you kind of relate that to the real estate side of things,
you want to own a house on Canal Drive.
Hold on. Let's get there. First, before we do that, let's get our crazy celebrity story. Then we're going to talk about exactly what you just said, McKay. You're on fire today. You're on point because, you're kind of you're jumping ahead of my notes. You've got a bunch of good stuff.
We used to know some people that we'd go watch from their house on Canal. So it was very cool.
My crazy celebrity story this week, I think at the heart of it, it's bait and switch. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about it. So the celebrity story this week is NBA legend Kevin Durant's former townhome was put on the market for $35 in Oklahoma City. So can you buy a townhome for $35? No, you cannot. And so it's interesting because this article, the owner says in the article, let's just put it out there for $35 and see if someone wants to own a part of NBA history. That's what the listing agent said. So, and then they put in there that the jaw-droppingly low price tag is meant to spark interest.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I would say so far, because we're talking about it here on the show, the ploy has worked. However, the agent says, I've gotten offers for $35. Mm-hmm. And when an agent gets a written offer for $35, do you know what they have to do?
I have no idea.
They have to present it to the owner. So those offers come in for $35. They're legally required. So like as agents, when we get a written offer and we receive that, regardless of what we think about it as their agent, it's not for us to think about. It is for us to do our job and present that to the owner. So this offer comes in. It's what they listed it at under the instruction of the owner. They have to present all of those offers. And then they have been rejected because the listing agent flat out says, we're not selling the house for $35. The last sale, he had bought in 2 of these. And in 2017, the last one sold for $1.15 million. So they're not selling it for $35. So then that gets into the whole discussion of, is that just bait and switch? And in all reality, they're admitting to it in the article. I think the craziest part about the whole article is that they put the list price of $35 on there. Mm-hmm. And then the second to last line in the property description on the MLS says, pre-approved buyers only, please. Who the freak put that in the listing? Pre-approved for what? For the $35?
Wow.
Like, you can't, I'm sorry, if you're going to run an ad like this and put that out there, then my biggest complaint about this whole thing is that they put pre-approved. You can't do that.
Pull the cushions on the couch. Let's find enough change.
Yeah. That's my biggest beef with this whole deal is they've got pre-approved buyers in there because, for $35, I just don't think we need to be pre-approved. And so obviously when you look at that, there were some big differences between what it was listed at, why they did it that way. However, I do appreciate the fact, though, that they do say they are following the fiduciary duties, and whatever offer they get, it's a lot of work for that agent because people are putting in offers. Now, I don't know all of Oklahoma's real estate law, but there's an argument in there. There's an argument in there in the real estate world that if you, as an agent, are well, never mind. There is an argument in there that you have, you have procured a buyer at a price for the seller. However, depending upon what Oklahoma's now buyer brokerage agreement says, that agent may or may not have earned a commission. But is it based upon $35? So is it really 90 cents? Is that the commission that they should get? So anyway, there's so many crazy things when you see stuff like that. But my big thing is we're not doing pre-approval letters for $35. That's the takeaway here this week. Well, John, before we went down this rabbit hole of $35 houses, and there's another one too, because the same strategy, sorry, I'm not out of the rabbit hole yet. I thought I was. This same strategy was used by Italian villages the last couple of years.
Oh, yeah, I heard about that.
We talked about it on the show a couple of years ago, the $1 house auctions.
Yes.
The difference being, and I did a ton of research on this. In fact, I had a bidding packet at one point that I had sent over to the Italian town so that I could bid on these houses because I wanted to research it and see what it was all about. Most of those houses, originally, no one was looking at them. So the first couple rounds, some of those houses actually sold for $1.
Wow.
But the stipulation, the reason why the village and town was doing it, because the stipulation was that within, I believe it was 2 years, you had to completely renovate and remodel the house and bring it up to where it was habitable. And so, yes, you could get it for $1, but there was massive other expenses involved. Now, in the meantime, and part of this is the reason it worked and they got the word out there. The last couple auctions that I saw, those houses were in massive disrepair, and they didn't sell for $1. Many of them went for $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, which you're like, that's still a pretty good deal for a townhome. It's basically a townhome condo style in the hills of Italy, but they almost all required $70,000, $80,000, $90,000 of renovations. So there's my rabbit hole on $1 houses and $35 houses. You're probably not going to get them for that price.
No.
Now, John, we were talking about waterfront, and you had started to mention. You said this is the week to have a house on Canal Drive. Like it was the first thing that came to your mind. Like what do you mean by that? What's going on in your thought process there?
Well, you are overlooking the river.
Yeah.
And the other 363 days of the year, you get a nice view and some sunsets and stuff. But for Saturday and Sunday, especially, you're watching the boats,
dude,
go up and down the river.
It's incredible. In fact, yesterday I drove up around. You sneak in Volland and Quinault there, and then there's some loops out there. There's like Neil Loop and some of the other. And man, some of those houses back there, you're right, that just look right onto the race course, are absolutely incredible. And then, and I talk about emotional reasons people buy houses, and I think when I've shown those houses to clients over the years, it is definitely an emotional response. When you walk out, a lot of those have the rooftop decks, like over the garages. They did an extended garage, put a rooftop deck over them. When you walk out there and you see that river and you see that view, it truly is incredible. And then you have the events like we just had, the River of Fire with the fireworks. And so, I mean, July's a big month for people that live on that street. And I always knew there was, the Andersons had, they always had the boat race party. And so you would go up to their house on Canal. And so, so we always look at that on why people buy and the emotional side of buying. Because a lot of people ask me, they're like, man, Lance, with interest rates where they're at right now and with things where they are, in fact, we did a whole show on it 2 weeks ago, I'm not sure if this would be a time that I would buy. And so I always bring up this time of year, especially when we have something like the Water Follies here and the hydroplanes. There's emotional reasons why people will buy. They might love the water. Like John said, the other 363 days of the year, you're getting the sunset views out there. They might want their kids in a certain school district. That's another big emotional buy that we have. People will call us all the time and they'll be like, man, our kids are about ready to go into elementary school. And I went to Richland schools. And so I've been living in Kennewick to be closer to work. But now that my kids are about ready, I want them to go through Richland schools. It's a very emotional reason that people will buy in that situation. The other thing that we see happen is events and traditions. So boat race parties. This is another one of those. I see a lot of people buy homes to host like Christmas and Thanksgiving, to host holidays. I can't tell you, how many times we've looked for homes and say like it's an empty nester couple and their kids are starting to have kids. And we'll go out and look at homes and in those cases, when I'm going into the house, almost nothing matters to them more than how big the dining room is. Yeah. And for a lot of couples we work with, they don't even want a dining room. Like that's not even on the list, but things change. And it's very emotional because they can be like, hey, I just want to have the big tradition holiday dinners and I want to have my kids over and I want to have my grandkids over. And that's why we're looking. So that's another big emotional reason that we see people buy. The other thing that comes up a lot for people is just not only holidays, but being closer to family. Another emotional buy. We've probably helped 3 people last week where I was like, hey, why are you guys coming to Tri-Cities? Why are you buying? Well, we have grandkids now, and so we're making the move to come to Tri-Cities. Or I had somebody say, well, my dad moved here a couple years ago, and now I want to be closer to them. And so family is another massive emotional reason that we see people buy in those situations. Well, we've been talking all about being on the water, kind of our hydroplane races, Water Follies show where we talk about what does it take to get on the water. And so it's interesting because before this show, I always pull up some listings and look to see what's available out there. And this year on the Pasco side, there currently are not any options. And that's kind of an indication of these properties don't always come up. I mean, there's only so many of those properties on the water that you can actually purchase. And if the property has been well maintained and done right, a lot of times you'll see people just solely buying these properties for the view and the land, even if they have to do a big remodel. But what could you buy that's on the water right now? Well, there are 3 condos in Richland that are directly on the water. You've got one of the Willow Point condos far north, like out near Battelle and WSU Tri-Cities. You've got one on Columbia Point Drive, and then my personal favorite, you've got one on Bradley Boulevard, which is a single level, almost 2,400 square foot condo that looks out right onto the Columbia River. And it's just a beautiful, beautiful view when you're out there on the patio. Then you've got to go to find the next available properties. The cheapest one that you can get on the water for is the Yakima River in Granger, where the Yakima River comes through there. So of all of the ones that I pulled up on the list, 13 riverfront, the cheapest one that you can get in Granger on the water, $624,000. Now, John, do you want to guess how much the most expensive one listed in the Columbia Basin on the water? It is the Yakima as well.
I'm going to say 875.
Well, you're low.
1.2.
Still low.
1.8.
There is currently in Columbia Basin on the Yakima River, there's a property listed for $4 million.
It's got acreage, doesn't it?
It does have acreage, yes. It's got acreage, and it's also got 7,000 square feet.
Wow.
And it has a massive amount of river frontage on the property.
Wow.
So it's been listed. So those are our ranges, 624 to 4 million. If you look at roughly what it takes to get on the river, like directly on the river, average price per square foot, $350 per square foot. And then the most expensive one per square foot coming in at $598 per square foot, which is for our market a higher end dollar per square foot for sure. So when you look at this, you've got to look at, why do these properties sell for that when you're on the water? Well, basically when it comes down to it, because a lot of people will come to me and they'll be like, hey, we want to get our iconic dream property, and we want to get a property that has a dock on the Columbia River. Okay, well, what happens in that situation is you just really start to limit your availability. It's not like when you find a house, I can show you 40 subdivisions in different areas. So if you look at, so docks and dock permits are controlled by the Army Corps of Engineers.
Yeah.
And that's a permit process. And so you have to have a permit for that property. And when you buy a property, it will, the owner can transfer that with the property. But there's going to be some stipulations that come into play with that. So that McNary shoreline plan only allows for 100 docks to be within that.
So you're not going to be able to add one.
No, and in fact, basically, it's my understanding from the Corps that those 100 are basically spoken for or within the application process.
Yes.
And now some of these applications that are currently pending have been in for, 3 to, there's even some that have been in for, 6 or 7 years. And so, but the number that they anticipate is it's basically full. Like if you buy on the river, like people will ask me, oh, well, why don't I buy that house in Richland? Mm-hmm. It's on the river and then I'll just add a dock. I pray that you do not have a real estate agent that just says, yeah, great idea. Because they absolutely do not know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
So you need to seek out other people for advice in that situation. Mm-hmm. And so that's another thing that people don't always realize is that the Army Corps of Engineers actually controls that shoreline.
Yeah.
Up to it, I guess if we're there's a lot of complicated ways. It's like pages and pages of documents, but basically the first 30 feet of that shoreline in most areas is controlled by the Army Corps. So you have to have a license to cross that land. Like say if your dock is below that, so you have to have a license to cross the land to get to your dock, and then you have to have a dock permit as well in that situation. And there's requirements. There's certain material that the dock can be built out of. The material has to allow a certain percentage of light to filter through it. And so you can't have solid decking on those docks. And so there's a lot of these requirements that you have to work with the Army Corps to get past. The other thing that I point out to people that a lot of times people don't realize is that if we say the Army Corps controls that first 30 feet, what are some of the things you need to take in consideration when you're buying on the water?
Yeah.
Well, how many trees are in that section? Because let me tell you what you're not going to do.
You're not going to remove a tree.
You're not going to run out there. Well, you can, but you'll be in federal court, which is in Richland. That's not the one you want to go to.
No.
So you have to look at what you're buying. What's on the shoreline? What does that vegetation look like? Because you can't run out there. You can't be trimming those things back and landscaping that. So you have to look at what that entails and what your view's not only going to look like now when you purchase, but what's your view going to look like in 10 years or 15 years if you're purchasing in those spots. So that's another thing to consider. The other thing to be aware of is that the first 30 feet we talked about being controlled roughly by the Corps. Well, then you're going to have the next likely 25 to 50 feet of your lot, depending upon where the high water mark is. That's going to be controlled by a riparian zone that if you're in any of the cities, they're going to have a riparian zone plan that you're also going to have to follow there as well. So now you look at your setbacks and you're like, oh, geez, you're telling me I can't just, put a garden shed down there or, I've seen these 10 or 15 boathouses that people have, built into the shoreline. Well, those are grandfathered structures that were built long before these requirements were put into place. So the answer is no. You're not going to be doing that. And so if anybody's telling you different, you need to do some research, talk to some agents that have experience with that. You can always call the Kenmore team. We can walk you through what that looks like. The other thing to notate, I've had a lot of people buy on the water before, and the other thing to be cognizant of is view corridors. So not just with the vegetation that we talked about, but where can the neighbor beside you build to? How far back can they do? If they do an addition, a lot of these houses get remodeled. And if they do an addition, what are those setbacks look like? And how could my view change based upon where the addition went? So view corridor is a big consideration in that situation. And then the other thing that you always have to look at is changes in the river and the shoreline.
Yeah.
Because this isn't, there's this little thing called erosion, right? Like it's not always going to be exactly the same. So what do changes in the level of the river look like for you, especially if you're looking in certain areas of the Yakima? I mean, the Columbia, like we have a pretty good idea. Notwithstanding a major catastrophe, which we're going to have all kinds of other problems if that's the case.
Yeah.
So Columbia, pretty well monitored and controlled. But in the Yakima, if you're buying close to that, there's
flood zones.
There's flood zone considerations. And you have to have what's called an elevation certificate. And so if you're looking at a property that's in the flood zone, you have to pay very, very close attention to the elevation certificate. Where exactly is the house sit? Where does the shop sit? Because you can literally find yourself in those situations underwater. And if people have been in Tri-Cities long enough, you know, they don't realize that where the Yakima comes through West Richland there in some of those areas, there's been times where you could not cross that way into West Richland, and it can change in a hurry. So these are some of the major considerations. If you're looking at buying on the waterfront, building on the waterfront, you need some guidance. Go to kenmoreteam.com, shoot us a message. I would love to walk people through what that looks like for them. Please be safe this weekend, but have a great time. It is our Tri-Cities crazy quintessential weekend. Enjoy the Water Follies, enjoy the air show, enjoy the boats, and we'll be right back here next week.